Hi Yarny friends, I'm Sara Sach. Welcome back to my crochet channel. This is our Rosie's Christmas blanket. Didn't she look cute there in those pictures? I thought she looked adorable. So what this is it's our Scrap Happy project for December. It's a very simple 1-row repeat, and we just alternate every 2 rows. And then we do a simple row of double crochet around the edge and then come back in alternating with shell stitches and single crochets. And it makes a beautiful, beautiful blanket. And these are just simple shell stitches, stitched in shell stitches. And I love how it looks with the 2 different colors. And I'll talk more about yarn when we get a little farther on in the video in the materials section. The idea of this was I wanted to use up some of my leftover Christmas yarns, and I wanted to make Max and Rosie a new Christmas blanket. And those of you who have followed me know that our precious little Max, he's already gone over the rainbow bridge. He's running and playing and able to see and hear now, so I'm not worried a bit about him, although I miss him terribly. But we still have our precious Rosie, and I wanted to make this blanket especially for her. It's all made with leftover Christmas yarns that are medium weight, number 4, and I think you're really going to love how simple and how fast this pattern works up. Now, if you make it according to my dimensions or my pattern, it's going to measure about 28 inches wide and about 32 inches long, and that includes the trim. And that makes a perfect size blanket for where Rosie sits on the couch. We always try to keep a blanket on the couch there. It kind of helps keep her hair off the couch, even though it doesn't, perfectly. But anyway, it does help. And I wanted her to have a Christmassy blanket. Now, I have listed on my blog the multiples and all the measuring dimensions, how many chains, how many rows, so that you can adjust this as big or as small as you want. And you're going to find it super easy to adjust. And you can find that information along with the complete pattern with lots of pictures and pictures of Rosie on my blog. And as always, I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. Now, I just used 2 different yarns for mine, but you can use as many yarns as you want to and as many colors as you want to. And you can change colors as often. You don't have to do it every 2 rows like I did. But what I used was the variegated color is called Merry Multi, and it is Premier Basix medium weight number 4 worsted weight yarn from Premier Yarn. And I loved it because it has a little bit deeper tones in it that goes along with this other yarn that I used. And this is the other one I used, is Herrsherners Worsted Stripes, and it's called Very Merry. They're both Christmas yarns. This one is a long striping yarn, and this one, as you can see, is a variegated. Well, I used all I had of this one. And so for today's demonstration, I'm going to use this as well. But I'm also going to use this one. It's a little bit different, and we'll see how that works up. And that's just for the demo, all right? And you're going to need approximately 3.5 ounces of both of the 2 yarns, which would give you a total of 7 ounces for the blanket if you make it this size. But if you make it bigger, of course, you're going to need more yarn. It is, like I said, medium weight, number 4 acrylic yarn. And if you want to make it in cotton, you can. Just make sure you use a medium weight, number 4. It would make a nice cotton blanket. And just a reminder, just because I made this for my precious pup doesn't mean you have to only make it for dogs. It would make a wonderful baby blanket, or make a big one, put it on the back of your couch. Make it for a friend in their favorite colors, because remember, you don't have to make this in Christmas colors. I just did for my Rosie. All right, so we stitched it up with an H-hook, which is a 5mm crochet hook. And then all you need is a needle for weaving in ends and a pair of scissors. The needle did not want to come up. All right, so let's get started. We're going to begin with our chain. So we'll make a slip stitch. And for the pattern, if you're doing it according to the pattern, you're going to need to chain 70 chains. All right? I'm going to be just doing a swatch, so I'm only going to do 36 chains. I'm going to do half the amount. But for the pattern, you need to do 70 chains. All right, so you need to do 70 chains and make sure they're just a little bit loose because you don't want them too tight because you don't want the bottom of your blanket to be all puckered up, okay? Once you've done your 70 chains, we're going to begin by double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll double crochet in each of those chains, working all the way across our row. And when you're counting, make sure that you count this chain 3 right here as your first double crochet. So we began in the 4th chain from the hook. We're counting this chain 3 as our first stitch, and so you're going to have a total of 68 double crochets. Now I don't have 68 because I'm working off a smaller swatch, so I don't have to completely remake another blanket, okay? But for row 1, you should have 68 double crochets. Then we chain 3 and turn our work. Our chain 3 on this row and on every row will count as your first double crochet. So we'll start in the next double crochet, and again, we're just going to stitch 1 double crochet in each of our stitches, working all the way across our row. This just gives us a nice foundation for our blanket. So row 2 is just 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets all the way across the row. So our chain 3 counted as our first double crochet, and then we started in the next stitch and stitched 1 double crochet across, and again, mine is a swatch, but you're going to have 68 double crochet stitches. All right, now we're going to change color, so we don't want to do our chain 3 yet. So we're going to bring in our second color, and that is if you're changing colors every 2 rows. So I'm going to bring in my new color. I'm going to leave my color 1 attached, and now I'm going to do my chain 3. And this is important because that chain 3 counts as your first double crochet on your next row. Now we're not going to be cutting our yarns as we change colors, because when we finish our blanket, we'll come back in and stitch around it and stitch over those yarns that we trailed up the side. All right, so our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and we're going to double crochet in the next 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. Now we're going to set up our row of shell stitches. All right, so we're going to skip 2 double crochets and then shell stitch in the next. And our shell stitch is 3 double crochets all stitched in the same stitch. All right, so we stitched 3 double crochets, we skipped 2, and then we stitched a shell stitch in the next. All right, now we're going to skip 2 and stitch a shell stitch in the next. And this is our repeat across for row 3. Okay, skip 2, shell stitch, skip 2, shell stitch in the next, and we'll do this all the way across. And again, I'm going to have less shell stitches because I'm doing a swatch opposed to your size blanket. Oops, we don't want that to happen. There we go. This yarn must just be a little bit splitty. I think this particular color is the Red Heart Super Saver in their Christmas colors. It's a pretty yarn also. I just think the other one, Premier Basix looked a little bit better, but this is pretty too. It's very bright. All right, so what you're going to do is you're just going to repeat this across, skip 2, shell stitch, skip 2, shell stitch, all the way across until you only have 3 stitches left. So I have repeated those shell stitches, shell stitch, skip 2, shell stitch, all the way across. And if you have done that according to the pattern, you're going to have 20 shell stitches. All right, so then we would skip the next 2, and that would leave 3 stitches on the end. So we'll skip those next 2, and we'll just stitch 1 double crochet in those last 3 stitches. All right, so you'll have 20 shell stitches, 3 double crochets at the beginning and 3 double crochets at the end. All right, of course I have less shell stitches because I'm just working off of a swatch. All right, and we're not changing colors on this row, and so we're going to chain 3. All right, let's do row 4. So we've chained 3. We're going to turn our work. Our chain 3 will count as our first double crochet on every row, and so we'll stitch a double crochet in the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2. Now we're going to stitch a shell stitch in the second double crochet of our shell stitch. All right, so we'll go to the second one and stitch a shell stitch. All right, so we've stitched our shell stitch in the middle or second double crochet of the shell stitch, and that's what we're going to do all the way across. So we'll go to the next shell stitch and stitch a double crochet in that second double crochet, which is of course the center double crochet. And then we'll just repeat this all the way across the row. So we're just stitching our shell stitch in the second double crochet of each of our shell stitches all the way across. So I placed a shell stitch in the second stitch of each of my shell stitches, and that brings us to our last 3 double crochets, and we'll just stitch a double crochet in each of those last 3. All right, and that's the way that row 4 should look. So now we're ready for row 5. I'm going to be changing colors every 2 rows. That way my color changes are always on the same side, and I can stitch over that when I put my trim on. You don't have to do it this way. I just want to myself, and that's the way I did my original pattern. So we're going to bring in our color 1, and you want to trail that up, and you want to make sure it doesn't droop but also isn't too tight. Okay? And then we'll make our chain 3 and turn our work. I do have a suggestion for you though. When you're working with 2 or 3 different colors of yarns, they can get twisted. And I have this little container here, and every now and then I just take my colors and unwind them. If not, you're going to end up with a twisted mess. Okay? Just an FYI. All right, so now we're ready for row 5. We're going to double crochet in those next 2 because our chain 3 counts as 1, and we'll double crochet in the next 2. And again, we're going to go to that second double crochet of that shell stitch and stitch a shell stitch. And then we'll just do this all the way across, just like we did on row 4. And so we're stitching our shell stitches in that second double crochet of our shell stitches. And it makes a really pretty pattern. And you'll do this all the way across, and then you'll come to those last 3. You'll stitch 1 double crochet in the last 3 and chain 3. So I have completed my row 5 on my swatch. And again, you're going to have 20 shell stitches on every row with 6 double crochets, 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end. And remember, your chain 3 counts as a double crochet on every row. All right, so let's do row 6 now. So we chain 3. We're again going to turn our work. Our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. And then we'll double crochet in the next 2. And then we'll go to that second double crochet of each of our shells and stitch a shell stitch. And you see, once we've got our pattern set up with our shell stitches, it's super easy. You're just going to stitch a shell stitch in each of the shell stitches all the way across, no matter the size of your blanket, and then end with those 3 double crochets at the end of our row. And that's why I think that this pattern is so pretty, because it's easy, it looks pretty, but it's also really fun to do because it stitches up really quickly. You can see my long striping yarn has changed colors. And then I have my 2 rows of variegated. So I alternated every 2 rows, and you can do that or you cannot. It's up to you. You can do as many colors in this blanket as you want to. You could even do it all in one color. I always say blankets look great in ombres, and I think this would make a beautiful ombre blanket as well. So I have completed row 6. So we have 2 rows of 1, 2 rows of the variegated, and then 2 rows back to color 1. All right, so now we're at the side where we're going to carry our yarn again. So I didn't chain 3, bringing in my color 2, or it could be whatever color you're changing, and see how I trailed those up the side? And that's going to make it really easy just to stitch over that with our trim, and then we won't have to weave those in every 2 rows. Now, if I'm going to do more than 3 or 4 rows, a lot of times I will cut those because I don't want a really long trail of yarn there. It's hard to keep the tension right. But if I'm just doing maybe 2, I'll go ahead, sometimes 3, I'll go ahead and stitch over it and trail it up, okay? So now we're going to chain 3. All right, and for the next 2 rows, we're just going to repeat what we did here. And then we'll change again and repeat, change again and repeat, because it's a 1 row repeat. 3 double crochets at the beginning, and our chain 3 is our first one, and then our shell stitches all the way across, ending in 3 double crochets. And so basically what you will do is you'll continue to repeat row 6 for 40 more rows, or more if you want to make a longer blanket, because every row will have the same amount of stitches. So basically, you're going to repeat row 6 for 40 more rows. So here's my original blanket. And also at the end here, I ran out of my variegated, and I just continued on with my long striping on the end. I don't mind. I love it. It's beautiful. All right, so once we get to row 46, or whatever row you want to stop on, of course, if you adjusted, then it's time for our trim. Now I'm going to show you how to do the trim with my swatch. All right, so once you've made your blanket the length that you want, we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn. And you should end up on the side where you have your colors carried. And I just cut this one because I didn't carry it on the swatch because I wanted to stick with this color. But I'm going to show you how to do this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to evenly double crochet around all 4 sides of the blanket. I chained 1, but we're going to need to chain 2 more because we need a chain 3. And we're going to stitch double crochets all the way around the edge of our blanket. And evenly double crocheting, you need to make sure that you go into the sides of those stitches and try not to go in those big holes, okay? Now when you come to that, I'll go in like this into that next stitch and stitch a double crochet. Now, when you're on the side that has these ends, these need to be weaved in, okay? But I like to go ahead and stitch over them and then come back in and weave them in. All right, so we're just going to double crochet around those stitches. That's going to hide that carry of our yarn as well as grab those ends. And then we can come back in. Normally I'll leave a longer tail, I will tell you that, and to leave me enough to weave it in with my needle, okay? So we're evenly double crocheting down the side of our blanket. And then that's going to bring us to the corner. And in the corner, we're just going to place 3 double crochets. And that's just going to help it move smoothly around in a nice sort of curved fashion for our corner. When you get to the bottom, we have our chains that we can stitch in across. And that'll make it nice and easy. We can just stitch across, placing a double crochet in each of those chains. Nice and easy. All right, we'll stitch that all the way across. We'll place 3 double crochets in the next corner. Then we'll work our way up, back up the side of our blanket. And then, of course, we'll place a double crochet in each of those stitches going all the way across. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and do this with my swatch just so you can get an idea of how that looks. You know, before we put the shell stitch trim on. So I placed a double crochet in each of the stitches working across the bottom of my swatch, which would be the bottom of your blanket. And then I evenly double crocheted up the next side of my blanket swatch. And then I placed the 3 double crochets in the corners. But going across the top, just in case you were wondering, all you're going to do is just place your double crochet in each of the double crochets of the shell stitches. That way we have a nice solid row of double crochet around all 4 sides of our blanket that we can add our shell stitch trim in. All right, so 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets, goodness gracious, there we go, of our shell stitches. All right, so here is my swatch. I have stitched all the way around it. And this is how the edge on your blanket will look. Of course, your blanket's a lot bigger. This is just a swatch to show you. You can stitch in those stitches down here. We evenly double crocheted on the sides, and then 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets across. And then we have 3 double crochets in each of our 4 corners. Now we're going to do that shell stitch. And it's really simple and easy, but I think it adds a lot to the blanket. All right. So I join to my double crochet, and I'm going to single crochet in that double crochet. We're going to skip the next and shell stitch in the next. And this is the same shell stitch, 3 double crochets in the same stitch. All right, so we're going to skip the next double crochet and single crochet in the next. Skip the next and shell stitch in the next. 1, 2, 3 double crochets in the same stitch, just like we did in here. We're going to skip the next, single crochet in the next, skip the next, and shell stitch in the next. And when you come to those corners, we rounded those, so all you're going to do is just work around those corners. Okay, so here's my shell stitch. I'll skip the next, single crochet in the next, skip the next, and shell stitch in the next. 1, oops, get in there, 2, and 3. All right, and that's the way it looks going around the corner. And you'll do this all the way around all 4 corners of your blanket. And I just love how it just adds a little extra something to the blanket and ties in with the shell stitches. It's very pretty. All right, so we'll just do this all the way around our whole blanket and then join back over here where we started with that first single crochet. So here's my actual blanket with this beautiful shell stitch. I tried to fold it so you can see that it looks beautiful on the front and the back of the blanket. It just ties in nicely and is an absolutely beautiful trim for a very simple blanket. And like I said, it ties in great with our shell stitches here. And that's why I love this blanket so much, because it's easy and it's beautiful. And depending on what yarns that you choose, you can make all kinds of different blankets. And remember, it's not just for the dogs. It's perfect for a baby blanket, a blanket for your bed or your chair. And again, you don't even have to do this in Christmas colors. Get in your yarn stash and just have some fun with whatever colors that you have, or maybe just get in your Christmas yarn stash and use up your Christmas colors. Either way, it's a beautiful blanket, it's a beautiful pattern, and it's super easy.